So I wanted to take a moment and talk about why I said that the United States has lost the war in Iran. We'll get into the details, but no one has articulated what winning the war in Iran would look like. Does winning mean that Iran capitulates on all of their nuclear material and gives that back? Does winning mean that the Strait of Hormuz opens and the oil shipments go through? Does winning mean that we get regime change in Iran? Is this regime change like the one we got in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we fight for 10 years? Is winning destroying Iran's military capabilities, but leaving the government intact and the ability to rebuild it? So when people say we can win the war, that we should win the war, that we have to win the war, they need to articulate what win means. So we're going to discuss here how we got to the war, who is involved in the war, the key players. We're going to discuss the geography of the war zone and how that affects both the war and the possible outcomes. We're going to discuss the geopolitical events that are shaping the results of how this war is going to turn out. And then at the end, we will show that the United States, as of right now, has already lost the war. Trump was negotiating with the Iranian government over their possession of nuclear materials and strategic missiles. It has been the goal of his administration to remove Iran's capability to build nuclear weapons and constrain, if not completely eliminate, their ability to build and launch strategic missiles. The Iranian government, concerned for its own survival, its own political goals, was not on board with completely disarming itself in the face of American demands. While these negotiations are going on, Benji, the Prime Minister of Israel, calls up Donald, his best friend, and says, let's get the guys together, go over to Iran, and shoot things up. That'll put everything in a good perspective, teach the Iranians a lesson, give the world a show of strength. Trump thought, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. They call their respective militaries, two of the most proficient, well-equipped, professional militaries in the world, and orchestrated a brilliant technological, strategic marvel of airstrikes, internet warfare. They were able to hit hundreds of targets, disable the Iranian air defenses overnight, and kill Khomeini, the leader of Iran, all in a matter of hours. They expected at that point that Iran would surrender. The problem was they killed the only person who could order the surrender. So the Iranians can't surrender until they find a new leader. While they're finding a new leader, the Iranian military, quite aware of the United States and Israel's strategic, technological, military capabilities, their professionalism and their effectiveness, knew that the first strike would play out pretty much like it did. So they planned for that. Because they planned for it, they issued orders to all of their subordinate issues months ago what they should do if the Iranian government was disrupted or destroyed. These plans included things like launching all the missiles and drones and ships that the Iranian military was in possession of in a cataclysmic counterstrike against the US, Israel, and Iran's neighbors. This counterstrike was on such a scale and to such a degree that it caught the United States off guard and the Arab allies in the Gulf. And Iran didn't capitulate. And they chose a new leader. And the new leader had to come up with a plan. And his plan, because he's a new leader and he has no power, has to be one where he shows everybody that appointed him the new leader that he's a tough guy. So he does the only thing he can that's left, and that's shut down the Strait of Hormuz, cut off the oil supply. Oil prices spiked because the Gulf controls about 20% of the world's oil supply, and a reduction of the world's oil supply by about 20% means that you would expect the price of gas everywhere in the world, because it's the world's oil supply, to go up sharply to cover that. That includes the United States. The US and Trump panic. The war is not ending. It's dragging on. They had no plan for the war lasting more than roughly 10 days. They had no plan for the Gulf being shut down. They had no plan for sustained Iranian resistance. They didn't have troops in place. They didn't have enough missiles in place. They didn't have the Navy vessels in place. They didn't have the war funding in place. They didn't have their allies in place. And now the United States is scrambling to come up with a plan. Let's talk about the key power players. We have Trump, President of the United States. His poll numbers are declining. He needs to win the midterm. He's got to come up with a plan to turn things around. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. He's just finished a long, relatively successful campaign to suppress the Palestinians in Gaza. His administration was coming to an end, and he needed an excuse to extend his duration in power. Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran. Iran is in a precipitous economic and military decline right now. The policies of the Iranian government has not been serving the needs of the country. Unrest is increasing. The economy is collapsing. They're running into cash flow problems. Let's talk about the Gulf for a second. We're talking about the Persian Gulf here. The reason the Persian Gulf is important is because all the countries adjacent to the Persian Gulf and the Gulf itself are currently supplying roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply. This is the fuel for the jetliners, gas for the cars, diesels for the trucks and the ships, natural gas for power plants, fertilizers for farmers. So we're talking about the basis of roughly 20% of the world's economy is built on what's going on in the countries around the Persian Gulf. Because we live in a globalized economy, the United States is not insulated from the economic disruptions that are caused by the political and military turmoil going on in the Persian Gulf. It affects our prices here at home, one for one. Let's go in depth on the power players. We'll start with Trump. As we stated, he was negotiating with the Iranians about reducing their nuclear stockpiles and their strategic weapons to a level that would create the security that he sought in the Middle East. He's got his eyes on the midterm. He's trying to come up with a plan to build up his base, increase support for his government and his policies in the midterm. He has very close ties with Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. They're very close friends. They talk a lot. They have a lot of shared ideas and goals about what leaders should do and how they should go about doing it. So Trump's goals going into this war is build his popularity, help the Republicans in the United States win in the midterms, help get global peace, and to reduce Iran's strategic and nuclear weapons dramatically, if not completely eliminate them. To do this, Trump has the vast might of the American military. It's extraordinarily technologically capable. The American military is highly motivated, incredibly well trained. It is the single most formidable fighting force in the world right now. He has the American economy, the largest single economy in the world. So he has all of the resources of this massive economy to call upon. He has a global alliance system. There are countries around the world that are aligned with the United States in their security interests and their economic interests. The EU, NATO, the Asian Pacific countries. The biggest challenge that faces Trump right now is that the United States, relatively recently, just finished 2 very long, decades-long wars in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and Iraq, that were enormously popular when they were started, but collapsed when the war and the fighting just kept dragging on and on and on without ever coming to a clear win at the end. His other big problem is that the deficit in the United States is starting to grow at an extraordinary pace. The growth of this deficit is so large that it is eating up Trump's ability to fund the growth that he's trying to create. It's restricting the amount of money that he can spend on the military, to grow the military, to solve the problems that he sees in the world. Trump is also broadly unpopular in the United States amongst Americans. There are a lot of people who feel very strongly, that recognize his strong leadership, that like his policies and support him. But they're not large enough to support a voting bloc large enough for the policies that Trump is trying to build. The majority of Americans are questioning a great many of Trump's policies, even if they're sympathetic to him. They're questioning how he's going about solving these problems. This limits his ability to respond to changes in a kinetic situation like the war in Iran, because he does not have the flexibility and the goodwill that he needs to ride this out. He has to get it right on the first try. The other great weakness that Trump suffers from is that his popularity worldwide is very low. His demanding of Greenland for the United States, even though Greenland is a member of NATO, so threatening to attack Greenland, to take it by force, is Trump directly threatening the NATO alliance that he would call on to help him win in the Persian Gulf against Iran. It is a fatal contradiction. It's irreconcilable. This extends to a great many of Trump's policies of how he treats foreign nations. He has not banked goodwill with them. He has created transactional relationships. When he negotiates with foreign countries, he frames it as what is in it for the United States, which is fine. But if he goes to war in Iran, these other countries are now given the opportunity to ask Trump, what is in it for us? What are you going to pay us to fight the war for? This severely limits his ability to negotiate a coalition against Iran. So let's talk about Netanyahu for a moment. He's the Prime Minister of Israel. Israel is an extraordinarily technologically advanced country. It's incredibly economically powerful for its size. They've just wrapped up a war against the Palestinians in Gaza. And Netanyahu is trying to establish his legacy and avoid being sent to prison for crimes that he may have committed. His goal is to cement the security of Israel permanently, to protect Israelis from the many deep entrenched terrorist organizations that exist in the Middle East. Many of these organizations get significant funding, equipment, and training from Iran. Iran has the technology, the equipment, and the training to continuously threaten Israeli security in a way that no other government in the Middle East is capable of doing. He needs to cut that down. Because the survival of Israel is on the line here, he does not suffer from the resource restraints that the Americans have. He can spend whatever money it takes. The Israeli IDF will expend whatever effort, whatever munitions they have, whatever tanks they have, whatever soldiers they have for the security and the survival of the Israeli people. And they will do it because their survival depends on it. They will do it as long as they need to do it. His biggest weakness right now is that in defeating Palestinians in Gaza, the IDF appears to have overtly targeted, deliberately targeted, journalists, women, children, and civilians, and humanitarian aid workers. While the survival of Israel is on the line, the targeting of women and children, the apparent targeting of women and children, makes it difficult to distinguish the difference between the terrorists that the Israelis are trying to defeat and the terror that the Israelis are using to defeat them. This has undermined Israel's support around the world. It is currently undermining Israel's support in the United States, and it is weakening Israel's ability to gather support that it needs for its survival. We need to talk about Khomeini. the supreme leader of Iran. As we mentioned, Iran is in decline. Its allies have been broadly defeated by losing the war in Syria, the successful attacks by the Israelis in Gaza and Lebanon, by the Americans suppressing the Houthis, by the Russians being distracted by their war in Ukraine. All of this has been undermining Iran's ability to militarily influence and politically influence the other Arab states to achieve its goals through force and terrorism. The economy is collapsing. The government is losing legitimacy. Khomeini's goal in his negotiations with Trump needed the sanctions to be reduced or eliminated. He needed to do it in a way that did not leave Iran defenseless. He had to keep a card in his hand that he could play. Khomeini was also the leader of a very large terrorist organization, the Iranian Republican Guard. He was financing terrorist organizations across the Middle East. He was doing this for religious reasons. The Iranians in the government believe that they need to spread their sect of Islam to the rest of the world. They're unconcerned with how they do it, but they're passionate about it. They are literally willing to die to make it happen. The Iranians are not Arabs. They're Persians. This is important. The Persians have been major power players for thousands of years. They're very smart. They're very well educated. They can make nuclear weapons. They have the resources to make nuclear weapons. They have the scientists and the engineers that can build the precision instruments required to make nuclear weapons. They can make their own missiles. Their missiles and their drones are so good that they're selling them to the Russians to use against the Ukrainians. This is not a minor third world player. This is a significant industrial, military, cultural country. They're organized and they're disciplined, and they have a way of making things happen. Let's talk about the Persian Gulf for a moment. As we've already indicated, 20% of the world's oil supply is coming out of the Persian Gulf. The Persian Gulf is relatively shallow. Because it's shallow and relatively small, it's relatively calm. This allows small boats to be able to traverse it relatively easily. You do not need large ocean-going vessels or warships. People in riverboats and fishing boats, like you see on the rivers of the United States, can traverse this easily, and they do. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a narrow point that all the shipping coming out of the Gulf has to go through. Think of it like a triangle, and Iran is on two sides of that triangle, and the Arab states are on the third side. So not only is it a narrow passageway, most of the passageway is actually controlled by the Iranians. At its narrowest point, it's 20 miles across. This means, roughly speaking, anybody with a good pair of binoculars standing on the coast can see everything going through it. You don't need fancy radars. You don't need fancy sonars. You don't need fancy targeting computers. Iran itself is huge. It's roughly a third of the continental United States. Imagine the Rocky Mountains and the Rocky Mountain states. That's what Iran is like. It covers roughly the same amount of space. It has high mountains. The mountains fill the countryside. These mountains are great for building bunkers, hidden roadways, underground factories. It makes them relatively easy to conceal things from satellites. Aircraft have to actually get down into the valleys to see. The Americans, AWACS, can't look into the country from outside because they're coming in. They just can't see what's behind the mountains. This gives Iran an enormous advantage for hiding missiles, drones, and other military equipment from the Israelis and the Americans. It also means occupying the country militarily is almost impossible without a large occupation force. An occupation force north of 500,000 men on the ground to occupy the country and control it. For reference, the United States has roughly 200,000 ground forces. And the 2,000 Marines that we're sending to the Gulf right now is about enough Marines to occupy one small island off the coast of Iran. So we've already discussed many of the reasons why Trump started the war in Iran. One of the reasons that it made it easier for him to decide to start the war is that he's already successfully struck the Iranian nuclear production facilities last summer with the B-2 strikes. These were extraordinarily technical accomplishments. The U.S. flew bombers literally halfway around the world and dropped giant penetrating bombs. These are rockets, basically. These penetrators that the B-2s dropped are rockets that tunnel into the ground with massive explosives on them. And the B-2s would time their drops so that each bomb would hit almost exactly the same spot repeatedly, and each bomb digging a tunnel just a little bit farther into the ground until after they've dropped like 3 or 4 in a row, the last bomb goes entirely through the tunnel and enters and explodes inside the Iranian base under a mountain. It's an extraordinary achievement of American technology and equipment and training, unparalleled in history. He also very successfully used the American military to disable Venezuela's air defenses and fly helicopters into the country to capture Maduro, the president of Venezuela, and extract him without any American casualties at all. Again, that was an amazing technological achievement and demonstrates that the Americans have extraordinary capabilities and reach with their military forces. So why not do it again? Now that Iran is being recalcitrant and not giving him what he wants while negotiating. One thing we need to be clear about while we're having this discussion and to provide a framework to understand the progress of the war in Iran is the difference between strategy and tactics. The U.S. military, and to a lesser extent the Israeli military, have extraordinary tactical capabilities. They can deliver bombs and missiles anywhere in the world, anytime, and hit anything. You can just type in somebody's street address in Moscow, and the U.S. military can deliver a 500-pound bomb through the window at that exact address on demand. This gives the Americans unparalleled, unbelievable success in destroying Iranian equipment, buildings, roads, power stations, radio stations, data centers, supply depots, missile launch systems, and missile production systems, which demonstrates tactical brilliance and tactical competence that is unparalleled in history. But tactics don't win wars. Tactics are how you execute wars. Strategy is what you use to win a war. We fought the Taliban in Afghanistan for over 10 years. We won every single battle. We hit every target that we aimed at, and we lost the war in Afghanistan. Tactics provide the capability to win wars, but tactics do not win wars. Strategy wins war. Why do you go to war? What are you going to accomplish in the war? How much time, effort, and money are you willing to spend to win the war? What does winning the war mean? What will you have at the end that you didn't have before you started the war? Wars are very expensive. They kill a lot of people. So when you go to war, you need to have an extraordinary result to justify the death, the destruction, the amount of money that you're going to expend. And you have to believe that there is literally no other way to accomplish your goals. That's cheaper. They may take longer. They may not be as satisfying. But strategy is what you need to win a war, not an extraordinary military tactical precision. Extraordinary military tactical precision just allows you the capability to achieve your strategic goals. One of the most extraordinary tactical successes that the Israelis and the Americans accomplished in the first opening hours of their war was killing Khamenei, the Iranian supreme leader. The precision required and the timing required to pull that off was amazing. The intelligence that was required, know exactly where he would be and when he would be there so that they would know that their bomb strike would kill him, demonstrates tactical competence and tactical brilliance on the part of the Israelis and the Americans. It also demonstrates gross strategic incompetence. While many people believe that Khomeini's death makes the world a better place, a safer place, the problem for the United States with Khomeini's dead, who in Iran surrenders the country to the U.S.? The Americans can't win until Iran agrees to surrender. If you kill the leader, the one who decides when and how they surrender, they can't surrender. So the only thing left for them to do is to fight, which is what they did. Now, of course, they're going to elect another leader, appoint another leader, and then you kill that leader. Now, the message is clearly communicated to the Iranians that you do not respect their process, their government, that you're committed to the elimination of their government, which does create uncertainty and confusion. It does weaken the Iranian government's ability to replace leaders. But gang wars are fought all the time, with leaders being killed constantly. There's always somebody who's ready to step up and replace them. There's always somebody who's willing to die for the cause. Killing off the leaders repeatedly does not actually bring you closer to victory. It may diminish their capabilities, but diminishing the capability is not why you went to war. You went to war to win. To win the war, you need them to agree to stop fighting. So either you need to kill every Iranian who would ever want to protect their country, or you need to make an agreement with them about why the US and Iran will stop fighting. And those are really your only two options. So let's talk about what the strategic goals of the United States, the Israelis, and the Iranians are, because this defines whether a side thinks that they won or lost the war. What are the United States' strategic goals? I suggest that there's two. One is to eliminate Iran's strategic nuclear weapons. The United States doesn't want Iran to be able to build nuclear weapons. It would be very destabilizing to have a government that funds terrorist organizations and uses terrorism to achieve its policy goals to be in possession of nuclear weapons. The United States also wants to restrict Iran's ability to build strategic missiles that Iran could use to attack American bases across the world, European countries, Arab allies. So eliminating or severely restricting Iran's access to nuclear materials and their ability to build and launch strategic missiles is of primary concern to the Americans. Another major concern that the Americans have is the flow of oil. The Americans need the unrestricted flow of oil through the Gulf of Hormuz. Trump's whole energy policy is built around oil. He's reducing America's ability to use solar and wind power to fulfill our energy needs, and is pushing for more fossil fuels, natural gas, coal for Americans to supply their energy needs. This dependence on oil means that globally the United States needs the price of oil to be low, because American businesses will sell to whoever pays them the most for their oil. And if a foreign country is going to pay more for the oil than American consumers, they'll sell the oil to the foreign country. So if Americans want oil, they have to pay the higher price. So to keep the price of oil down, Trump needs the Gulf of Hormuz to be open and free flow of oil and natural gas to world markets. What are Israel's strategic goals? We've already touched on that, but Israel's strategic goal mirrors the American. They want to deny Iran nuclear weapons. They want to deny Iran strategic missiles. But they also want to undermine, diminish Iran's ability to support and project power through terrorists, proxy organizations. Israel doesn't have the same dependence on world oil supply that the Americans have. So they're not as sensitive to the flow of oil out of the Gulf of Hormuz. and they're willing and able to withstand enormous price fluctuations in the price of oil if they achieve their strategic goal of reducing Iran's ability to project force. What is Iran's strategic goals? Iran's strategic goals is to survive. They don't need to win. All they need to do is not lose. If they survive, they can live to fight another day. They want to continue to be a world player. They want to be the dominant force in the Middle East. They want to project Shia Islam and Iranian power to the neighboring states. They want to be a global player in the oil market. These things can all be accomplished by just surviving. They still produce oil. The United States still needs to buy oil. They control the Strait of Hormuz, which means that they can control the world's supply of oil. When they sell oil, they get money to fund their goals to spread Shia Islam. All they need to do is survive. So of the three things that the United States wants to accomplish, the unrestricted flow of oil, denying Iran nuclear weapons, and regime change, require that Iran not restrict the flow of oil, requires Iran to stop building strategic weapons, and requires Iran to give up its current government. Historically, you can only change governments through putting boots on the ground. There is no evidence, there is no situation in history where regime change was accomplished without troops. The United States could fund an Iranian revolution, but funding an Iranian revolution would destabilize the Middle East and cause a long protracted war along the Gulf of Hormuz, which would disrupt the flow of oil. Regime change in a civil war like that would encourage the use of and development of nuclear weapons by the side that wants to win the war using nuclear weapons. In the present context, as Israel wins by bombing Iran's oil reserves, oil refineries, production points, which reduces the oil supply, which restricts the flow of oil, which undermines the American strategic goal of unrestricted flow of oil. The Iranians want to produce oil and ship oil around the world, sell the oil, get the money to fund their war against the United States, which matches the Americans' goal for the unrestricted flow of oil. There are contradictions that are fatal that are built into the American strategic goals of unrestricted flow of oil, denying Iran nuclear weapons, and regime change in Iran. The unrestricted flow of oil requires the cooperation of Iran in not blocking the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran is inclined to do because they also want the oil to flow, because that's where they get their money from. America's ally, Israel, is fine with the flow of oil being restricted because it chokes off their Arab neighbors' money supply from the global trade of oil. It strengthens Israel strategically as long as the Gulf of Hormuz is closed. This is why the Israeli Air Force has attacked Iranian oil fields. They're taking the opportunity to reduce the future capabilities of the Iranian government. The Americans are against those attacks because it will raise the price of oil and gas prices even after the war is done, which contradicts the American goal of the unrestricted flow of oil. Not putting boots on the ground. If they don't put boots on the ground, they can't cause regime change. Without regime change, one of the American goals is de facto off the table and unachievable. You're not going to get regime change without boots on the ground. The United States is running out of money. This war is hideously expensive. They burned through $11 billion in the first couple weeks of this war. The U.S. government is burning up all the money they've set aside for contingencies like this, of funding the U.S. military in wartime. To get more money, the Trump administration needs to go to Congress and ask for $200 billion to fund the war in Iran, to open the Strait of Hormuz to the unrestricted flow of oil. At the end of this $200 billion, there is no guarantee that the United States will have control of Iran's strategic weapons and their nuclear stockpiles. They can make it more expensive for Iran to continue developing strategic weapons and nuclear weapons. but they will not have demonstrated the capability of stopping it. The Americans are basically on a clock right now. They have a few weeks at most until their funding runs out, and the Americans have no more money to spend on fighting Iran. They need to get this funding through Congress. Congress will want to know what they're getting for their unprecedented $200 billion that they wouldn't have gotten if they hadn't spent the $200 billion. When the war started, the Iranians didn't have strategic nuclear weapons. When it ends, the Iranians still won't have strategic nuclear weapons. When the war started, the Iranians had the capability of building strategic nuclear weapons. And when this war ends, the Iranians will still have the capability of building strategic nuclear weapons. When the war started, the Iranian government was shaky and unstable and beset with very serious problems. When the war ends, the Iranian government will still be in place and will still have to deal with all of those problems. The war will not have strategically changed the balance in the Middle East. The Iranians will have still accomplished all of their goals. The Israelis will have accomplished their goals, and the Americans would have accomplished none of their goals. So as it currently stands, the United States has lost the war in Iran.